Good morning and welcome to BizNews Daybreak. I'm Kerry Lanaghan, filling in for BizNews editor Alec Hogg today. We start with the latest Neil de Beer Sunday show, where BizNews journalist Chris Stein spoke to retired US intelligence analyst Colonel Chris Wyatt on the one-year anniversary of US President Trump's offer of refugee status for Afrikaners in the US.
Well, Chris, the refugees who've come to America number of approximately 2,000 right now. Now, remember that this was a proof of concept for about 6 or 8 months, and then the U.S. government shut down. So the refugee program, from a South African perspective, really didn't pick up any steam until mid-November. We had 137 come over in 2 weeks in November, then 591, I believe it was, in December. But that was only 2 weeks as well because of Christmas exodus when most of the U.S. employees go on holiday. And then in January, they didn't start up again until the 5th when they first started flying. So that gave them about 20 plus days. But in that short period of time, we now have just about 2,000. And these numbers come out every month officially from the government. So the refugees that I've been talking to, the vast majority of them have had a very good experience with their case officers. However, there is a small minority who've received very poor treatment. Some of it's because of bigotry against South Africans and stupidity of people who look at this and they believe the fake media that say that this is a program for white farmers and Afrikaners, like Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola claims on CNN that you have to be white and be an Afrikaner, which is just a fabrication, a lie. It's always been the case. It's for Afrikaners who are given preference, or not priority, not preference, but priority, but for racial minorities as well. And as I've said from the very beginning, there are coloreds, Indians, and even some black South Africans who've come over. Not many black South Africans, but example, we have white South African families that have adopted, neglected, and abandoned black children, and they're their kids now. So they've come over as part of the program with the families. We also have a couple of interracial marriages where black and whites have been married and they've been abused because of that and persecuted because of the interracial marriage. A few couples like that have come over, and we've got a number of colored families over here. I've been reporting this for the better part of a year, and only now is South African media beginning to take a closer look at this. The smaller media outlets, but it's working its way towards larger media outlets, and they're going to be forced to admit the truth that they've been lying for the last year, but they won't say that. Now they all reaching out to me. Suddenly, everybody wants to talk to me because they want access to the colored families, but they don't care about the other refugees. But the refugees, for the most part, are doing pretty well. And you can imagine being a refugee is a tough road to hoe. Unless you come here with millions of dollars in the bank as an asset, you're starting over your entire life. And if you're 35 or 45, that's a tough road to hoe. I mean, if you're 22, you're just starting life out. It's not so hard. You know, you don't have credit history in South Africa. You don't have assets. But if you have that in South Africa, you give it up. And many of these people have given it up. And I saw in Belofteland, the CakeNet documentary, which I appear in episode 5, that Kara Hotzenberg, who's a refugee in Twin Falls, Idaho, whom I visited, she talked about how President Ramaphosa called the refugees cowards. And she said, fine, I'll wear that label. I'm a proud, living coward. My children are safe and can play out in the front yard without being murdered. Basically, that's my paraphrase on what she said. She said, call me a coward. I'm a proud coward, and I'm happy to be here. So most have had a good experience. A few are running into some difficulties related to the poor care of refugees from some agencies and some local offices. What I've determined, Chris, because I went and did an investigative effort up in Rochester, New York, is that this tends to be a lack of oversight, from my point of view, by these agencies who are large, multinational, and U.S.-wide agencies. And they'll have local offices where they're not paying attention to what's happening, and you get abuse from a few of these case officers. I don't think that it's everywhere. It's just been a small number of cases, but it's real. It's genuine. And it's not just South Africans, because South Africans, some of them think it's just towards them. But I mean, I spoke to an Afghan refugee in Rochester, New York, who told me that he arrived a year prior and that the case officer took him to a hotel in the dead of winter in Rochester, which is a very cold place, stuck him in a hotel, gave them no cash assistance, which they're required to give them by law, and no food, no cell phone, and came back a week later. I mean, this guy barely speaks English. He's got a wife and a 3-year-old kid. What are they supposed to do? So fortunately for him, he had a cousin that lived nearby who knew he was coming and made sure they had food for that week. But then the person told this refugee, this Afghan who barely speaks English, to go find the office to apply for food stamps. And of course, the refugee doesn't even know what this office is. He goes there. Finally, someone gives him a ride. And the agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, says, what are you doing here? Well, I came to apply food stamps. We have to have an appointment. Okay, can I have an appointment? No, your case officer has to make the appointment. They have all the documents from the government. They're the ones. So then the worst part about this is an Afghan refugee who's a Muslim. He said to me, I was sitting in his car. He's been here a year now. He said, I asked my case officer, because I'm Muslim, do you know where we can buy halal food? Because it's not on every Pick and Pay, Checkers. We don't have halal food. It's not like South Africa. And so, fair question. And the case officer said, well, you people eat dog. Why do you need halal food? True story, Chris. So this is happening to more than just South African refugees in the past. And it raises a question about, is there a level of corruption, and is there like we see in Minneapolis with these daycare centers, unrelated, but a level of corruption? And also, how have refugees who don't speak English, who are just grateful that they've escaped the conflict and that they're actually living and will take anything, any crumbs they can get just to get out of Afghanistan or out of Sudan or out of Somalia, how many have been mistreated over the past number of years? And it's not this administration. This is a problem I think is systemic because, in my view, there's a lack of oversight by the government and by these agencies at every level. And then as a consequence, you get people who just do what they want locally, and there's nobody follows up on it. But that's been a small number. I would say that of the 2,000 come over, maybe 3% at most have had this experience.
From there to the UK, where fallout from the Epstein saga is now colliding with frontline politics in Westminster. Here's our partners from Bloomberg.
Of course, the pound is in focus. Suddenly, this political risk is back on the table for Keir Starmer. The UK Prime Minister's political future is in the balance after his chief of staff quit over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. This after revelations over Mandelson's past ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And according to our sources, Downing Street is bracing for cabinet ministers to push for Starmer's resignation. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson. So, Ross, how did he get into such a situation to begin with?
Well, it's interesting, as you say, the whispers around Starmer are getting louder and more public, which suggests that he actually is now in some danger because, of course, the issue around Mandelson has been known for some time, his past links to Jeffrey Epstein, and yet this administration pushed ahead with making him, at least then, the ambassador to the US. The idea was he understood Donald Trump. He'd be able to help the UK navigate the waters of this Trump presidency, which turned out obviously to have been a mistake because all that's really dogged him has been the Epstein issue. And now it's really consuming Starmer's government, the extent to which Keir Starmer knew about Mandelson's long-running ties to Epstein and yet made him ambassador anyway. And so now, of course, his chief of staff has resigned. But does that just in a way blow back against Starmer, because ultimately the person who made this decision was Keir Starmer. And so, of course, his chief of staff has resigned because he suggested that he do it, but the ultimate decision was not his. And so you can see now the noises around Starmer growing ever louder. The concern is this just consumes his government for, the election's not for a couple of years, but he's had several missteps and mistakes in his tenure already. And can he get above this and beyond it and get back to what he wants to talk about, at least in the next couple of weeks? That's very unlikely.
Yeah, so is there a way that he can shore up his position at this point, especially when he does have a couple of local elections also coming up?
Well, that's the question. Can he? Does he bring some of these people into the tent, give them bigger jobs in his government? Would they really want to do that if they're considering challenging him for the leadership? Do they wait to see how these elections go? You've got one by-election in a couple of weeks. You've got a big set of local elections in May. Those tend to go against the national government no matter what. People use them as a chance to give the national government a bit of a kicking, but they could be pretty bad for Labor, especially bad in this case. So do you bide your time, you wait for those to roll through, Starmer takes, he has to take the heat for that outcome no matter what, and then you step in and challenge him. So, would they really want to come into his administration in a bigger way right now if that's what they're really thinking about? In fact, keeping your distance from Starmer might benefit you if you're really thinking of making a leadership challenge and saying you can be the one who can lead Labor, into the next election, which is still some years away, but a lot of ground for Labor to make up either way. So it's very difficult to see what could be the path forward for Starmer here. What can he do to shore up his leadership, with these allegations still rolling on and likely to go on for several months at least.
In Japan, a snap election has delivered a dramatic result and could reshape the country's policy direction. Here's our partners from Bloomberg.
And we begin in Japan, where Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has secured a historic landslide win in Sunday's snap election. Local broadcaster NHK reports Takaichi's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has won a two-thirds supermajority in the lower house. Now, this outcome positions her as Japan's strongest leader in the post-war era. Here is Bloomberg's Brian Fowler.
6 months ago, the LDP was completely on the ropes. It had lost its majorities in both houses of parliament and was muddling through the summer. And then Takaichi becomes the nation's first ever female prime minister in October. 4 months later, she secured the greatest election victory in the history, certainly in the post-war history. And she's going to become that much more assertive, I think, on the international stage as well as domestically.
That is Bloomberg's Brian Fowler. Analysts say Takaichi now has a clear mandate to use fiscal stimulus to break a long-standing deflationary cycle. The yen is weaker right now at 157.65. Later in the day on Sunday, Takaichi said she is looking forward to visiting the White House in the spring to strengthen the Japan-U.S. alliance.
And staying with the Bloomberg News Now podcast, we turn to markets. After last week's violent moves in gold and fresh comments from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is blaming Chinese traders for last week's wild swings in the gold market. That story from Bloomberg's Monica Ricks.
Secretary Bessent addressed a record-breaking rally in precious metals fueled by speculative buying, geopolitical turmoil, and concern about the Federal Reserve's independence that abruptly reversed last week.
Things have gotten a little unruly in China. They're having to tighten margin requirements. So the gold looks to me kind of like a classical speculative blow-off.
Bessent on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures. The turmoil helped lift the dollar, and the Dow topped 50,000 for the first time last week. Bessent says that shows the U.S. economy is headed in a positive direction. Monica Ricks, Bloomberg Radio.
Back to South Africa. A homegrown tech platform tackling emergency response and how that model is scaling beyond our borders. Here's BizNews journalist Linda van Tilburg in conversation with Aura's Justin Suttner.
In the beginning, we always used to get misconstrued as an app or a security company or medical. We're not. We're essentially a marketplace platform. And what that means is that we've aggregated and added pretty much every security and medical response company on the country onto one platform. And through using our technology that we've built ourselves, we then have this platform, and we call it a marketplace because we call our service providers our suppliers, and then we clicked in the demand side of it. So squarely a tech platform that operates similar to a marketplace.
And this is business to business.
So our model started off like that, so business to business. And so we partnered with the likes of First Rands or FNB, Outsurance, Momentum, MyWay, Trackers a client. Uber was actually our first client, so we're the back end that we link to that Uber SOS feature for drivers and riders and Uber Eats, and that is how we still to this day distribute our product or our services through varying different corporations in South Africa, which is what we call our personal safety product, which is essentially around protecting an individual outside of their primary residence.
Well, Uber is a big customer. Who else?
So as I said, we're got great partners. So Tracker in the telematics space, FNB in the banking space, Outsurance, Momentum insurance, and for staff, we've also got Investec. We provide a lot of support for their staff, and quite a few other companies. We also work a lot with the likes of Fidelity. They're a client as well. So we really have some big corporate names as clients, and we actually refer to them as partners and distributors.
So in practice, how does this work? Someone triggers an emergency alert, and what happens?
Sure. So as I said, we distribute our product through big corporates, and what they do is either on-sell this or provide it or embed it into policies or banking products or sell this to their customer base. And what essentially they're selling is access to our service. And the way that someone gets access to our service is via a range of different, what we call modalities. So whether that's an application, a phone number, a panic button, or any real way that's we have the ability to get someone's location. So when someone activates a distress or a panic alert, it comes through to our platform, and our platform immediately, using our proprietary algorithm, finds the nearest private vetted responder or medical, depending on the situation, to that person's location. So in a sense, we're aggregating those emergency services, and that the nearest, let's say, security provider or the nearest armed responder or medical will essentially pick up that alert and respond to that user using our technology that we provide to those companies.
That's your BizNews Daybreak for Monday, the 9th of February. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.